The construction of proofs in infinite series. The fact that every conception is true only in relation to another one, even though the ideal body of knowledge, infinitely remote from us, may include an unconditioned truth, indicates a relativism in our behavior that also extends to other areas. It is possible that norms of practical activity exist for human sociation which, recognized by a superhuman mind, might be called the absolute and eternal right. This would have to be a Causasuean law, i.e. it would have to be self-legitimating, for if its legitimacy were derived from a superior norm, the latter would be the absolute determining factor of the law as valid under any circumstances. There is, in fact, no single legal rule that could claim to be absolutely unalterable, each has only the temporary validity that changing historical circumstances allow. If the legal content is legitimate and not arbitrary, its validity derives from a previously existing legal norm which justifies the setting aside of the former legal content in the same manner as it previously upheld it. Every judicial system contains in itself forces, ideal as well as external, that make for its own alteration, extension or abolition. Thus, for example, the law that assigns legislative power to Parliament not only provides the legitimate basis of law A, which abolishes law B enacted by the same Parliament, but also makes it a legal act for the Parliament to delegate legislative power to another body. This means, regarded from the other side, that the worth of every law depends upon its relation to another law. No law has worth by itself. Just as new and even revolutionary knowledge can be demonstrated only by means of the content, axioms, and methods of previous knowledge, though an original truth, which cannot be demonstrated and the self-sufficient certainty of which we shall never be able to attain, has to be assumed, so we lack a self-subsistent right, although the conception of it hovers above the series of relative legal rules, each dependent upon legitimation by another rule. To be sure, our knowledge rests upon first principles which cannot be proved at any given time, because without these we should not arrive at the relative series of derived proofs, but they do not possess the logical dignity of being demonstrated. They are not true in the same sense as that which has been proved, and our thinking accepts them as ultimate points only until it reaches a higher stage at which that which was accepted as axiomatic can be demonstrated. Correspondingly, there are, of course, absolutely and relatively pre-legal conditions, in which an empirical right is established by force or other means. This right, however, is not established legally, it is accepted as law as soon as it exists, but its existence is not a legal fact. It lacks entirely the dignity of that which is based upon law. In fact, every power that establishes such a non-legal right strives for its legitimation or for the fiction of legitimacy, as if in homage to that absolute right, which lies beyond all relativity and is unaffected by it, but which is symbolized for us only by deducing every existing legal rule from a preceding one. But even if this infinite regress did not still establish our knowledge as conditioned, it would be accomplished, perhaps in another fashion. If the proof of a statement is traced to its foundations and these again to theirs, etc., it becomes evident, often enough, that the proof is only possible, i.e. itself provable, if the original statement itself is assumed to be demonstrated. In any individual case, this renders the deduction illusory since it involves circular reasoning, but it is not inconceivable that our knowledge, taken as a whole, is imprisoned within this pattern. If one considers the vast number of hierarchically ordered presuppositions, stretching into infinity, upon which all particular knowledge depends, it seems actually possible that the statement A is proved by the statement B and the statement B through the truth of C, D, E, etc., until finally it can only be proved by the truth of A. The chain of reasoning C, D, E needs only to be sufficiently long so that the return to the starting point cannot be imagined, just as the size of the Earth conceals its global form and gives us the illusion of being able to advance straight into the infinite. The interrelationship that we assume in our knowledge of the world, that from every point we can attain by demonstration every other point, seems to make this plausible. If we do not want to remain dogmatically once and for all with a single truth that needs no proof, it is easy to assume that this reciprocity of proofs is the basic form of knowledge, conceived in its perfect state. Cognition is thus a free-floating process, whose elements determine their position reciprocally, in the same way as masses of matter do by means of weight. Truth is then a relative concept like weight. It is then perfectly acceptable that our image of the world floats in the air, since the world itself does so. This is not an accidental coincidence of words, but an allusion to a basic connection. The inherent necessity for our minds to know the truth by proofs either removes the discovery of truth to infinity, or leads it into a circle, so that one statement is true only in relation to another one, this other one, however, eventually only in relation to the first. The totality of our knowledge would then be as little true as would the totality of matter be heavy. The qualities that could be asserted validly about the interrelationship of the parts would lead to contradictions if asserted about the whole. This reciprocity, in which the inner elements of cognition authenticate the meaning of truth for each other, appears to be upheld by another form of relativity, that between the theoretical and the practical interests of our life. We are convinced that all representations of what exists are functions of a specific physical and psychological organization which do not mirror the outside world in any mechanical way. The images of the world of an insect with its mosaic eyes, of an eagle with its almost inconceivably keen sight, of an olm with its buried, functionless eyes, of ourselves and of innumerable other species, must be profoundly different from each other, and we must conclude that none of them reproduces the content of the external world in its inherent objectivity. Nevertheless, these representations, which have been characterized at least negatively, form the presuppositions, the material and the directives for our practical activity, through which we establish a relationship with the world as it exists in relative independence of our subjectively determined representation. We expect certain reactions to our actions, and these usually occur in an appropriate way, i.e. one that is useful to us. The same is true of nature's reaction to animal behavior, which is determined by totally different pictures of the very same world. It seems to me to be a very striking fact that actions carried out on the basis of representations that are not at all identical with objective being nevertheless secure results of a reliability, expediency, and accuracy that could hardly be greater if we knew the objective conditions as they are in themselves, whereas other activities based on false representations tend to injure us. We can also see that animals too are subject to deceptions and to corrigible misconceptions.